Is it 6 o'clock yet? Yes? Okay. Right. Well, welcome to everybody this evening. Thank you for coming along. I'm really delighted this evening to be able to welcome Dr. Dora Thornton and Dr. Frances Parton as our speakers today. Dora Thornton, the Goldsmiths Company curator, has widely published on contemporary and historic silver, jewellery, and art medals, and adds to the collection through gifts, purchases, and commissions. Her publications include specialist studies on the medals, brooches, and rings in the collection, the latter co-authored with Frances Parton. From 1990 to 2018, Dora was curator of Renaissance Europe at the British Museum, where she curated that magnificent exhibition, Shakespeare Staging the World, in 2012, as well as launching a new gallery for the Waddesdon Bequest in 2015. I'm going to introduce Frances at the same time, I think, for the sake of continuity afterwards. So Dr. Frances Parton studied early medieval history before becoming a curator of decorative arts, with an emphasis on metalwork and jewellery. She has worked at the Fitzwilliam Museum, the National Army Museum, the V&A, and English Heritage, before overseeing the final stages of the Knowle House renovation for the National Trust, which reopened in 2019. She joined the Goldsmiths Company that same year, her most recent publication being Life and Legacy, Dorothy Hogg, published by the Goldsmiths Company in 2023. So the combined lecture, we're going to start with Dora first, is called Working with the Goldsmiths Company Jewellery Collection, 1961 to 2024. Dora, welcome.
Yes, I think it should be dim because the slides are the most important thing. Thank you. Can you hear me? Good. It's a great pleasure to introduce our remarkable collection of studio jewellery to such a distinguished audience, both here and online. The best way to convey its very special quality is to explain its history, how we work with it, develop it, wear it, and use it, collaborating with our colleagues in Goldsmiths Fair, the Goldsmiths Centre, and the Assay Office. It is these living connections which make it distinct and different in character. The Goldsmiths Company collection of modern jewellery, contemporary studio art jewellery and precious metals, began with an exhibition at Goldsmiths Hall in 1961. The International Exhibition of Modern Jewellery was a collaboration between Graham Hughes at the company and Carol Hogben and Shirley Berry of the Victoria and Albert Museum. It aimed to trace the evolution of modern jewellery design. The avant-garde display that you see here by Alan Irvin juxtaposed work by independent designer and jewellery studios from 33 countries, with antique pieces and with work by leading houses. Jewels were pinned onto orange silk in tetrahedral cases. Our wonderful in-house designer, Manuela Holfert, has imitated that design in our recent exhibitions because this is how we began. Hughes threw out a challenge. The most distinguished new jewels are in fact very close to modern painting or sculpture. Sometimes they are actually made by painters or sculptors. Britain was just beginning to emerge from post-war austerity with a prohibitive purchase tax on luxury goods. Hughes sensed that the time was ripe for something different, that, as the brilliant jeweller John Donald put it, if one had a workshop and some cash, anything was possible. The exhibition took place at Goldsmiths Hall. One clever innovation was to persuade De Beers Consolidated Mines Limited to sponsor an open national competition with prize money amounting to £10,000 for British work. The aim was to produce pieces which would be, quote, both experimental and beautiful, frankly belonging to 1961, which would not have been made at any other time, as uninhibited as modern sculpture. The curators commissioned outstanding jewels cast from wax models by modern artists who'd never even thought of designing jewellery before. Such jewels were not often to be found in the open market, and the competition provided the necessary financial backing for their production by H.J. Company Limited. So we have the amazing pectoral cross modelled by Elizabeth Frink, a stylized bird which looks back to ancient Egypt, which is cast in bronze, and a group of jewels which won prizes from De Beers in the category of jewels worth up to £100. The cast concrete-like blocks of the bracelet by the Irish sculptor and surrealist F.E. McWilliam, modelled by the artist and cast in silver, the mussel-like cast brooch by the sculptor Bernard Meadows with a single diamond, the gold wire and diamond spray by abstract sculptor Robert Adams, the Jackson Pollock-like cast gold web by Mary Kessel, who was a graphic designer and war artist, didn't win a prize, but is outstanding in its originality. The collar of gold wire set with 208 diamonds, designed by the architect and designer Louis Osman, won second prize in the top-level De Beers competition, and Roger King's platinum and baguette diamond bracelet won the top prize at the same level. The contrast between King's platinum structure and that Elizabeth Frink pectoral gives you, I think, a sense of the aesthetic and technical range and the dynamic contrast of this amazing show. Pieces from the competition were given to the V&A and the company and form the foundation of our collection. Quite how radical and different the new jewellery could be is revealed in the first 4 pieces, all of them rings, which Hughes acquired from or after the 1961 exhibition. He grouped the pieces together in an iconic image in his 1963 book on modern jewellery, which we have recreated here. So left to right, the Fairy Castle topaz ring by the Finnish maker Björn Wexström, a fine diamond and gold ring by the Swedish industrial designer Sigurd Persson, a textured ring in gold with flake granules by the Italian sculptor Bruno Martinazzi, and a ring in coloured gold and yellow by the American maker William Hendel. Hughes was trying to nurture taste for the new jewellery, especially in Britain, and this is where our collection begins. The modern jewellery collection, begun in 1961, is a unique and consistent collection of innovative studio jewellery in precious metal. Graham Hughes supported the London-based designers who came to the fore in the 60s throughout their lives, especially Andrew Bremer. We have more work by him in the collection than by any other maker. There's a wonderful wit and organic feel to his designs, stones cradled in textured gold, like the iconic Bremer brooch from 1962 that's shown here. The citrine ring designed by Bremer and made by Michael Goschalk was shown in the 1961 exhibition. Its mixture of wonderful transparency and gold texturing is an indication of what was to come in jewellery, a complete blend of stone and setting. Graham Hughes chose to launch his seminal 1963 book, Modern Jewellery, in Bremer's workshop, as in this photo, which shows Andrew Bremer and I believe his Michael Hughes' wife, Serena Hughes, Graham Hughes' wife, Serena Hughes, who is wearing the pieces which are now in the company collection. Among the makers supported by Hughes was the wartime immigrant, the maker and teacher Gerda Flökinger, as she developed her organic fusion technique, something we showed in our Rings, the Art of Invention exhibition in 2022, which took inspiration from the design of the 1961 show. Hughes supported Wendy Ramshaw from her very first exhibition at the Pace Gallery in 1970. He loved her interlocking ring sets, which could be displayed on stands as modernist sculpture in their own right. And the bow ring set of 1975 is a rare and important piece. We were delighted to be able to acquire her own 3 cones necklace in turned white Wedgwood jasperware after her death in 2018. The cumulative result of these energies is that the collection holds rare early work by all these makers and that the creative and technical experiments of the 60s and 70s still resonate through our collection. So here are Gillian Packard's innovative companion rings of 1964 in textured gold, with the engagement ring set with a citrine, kite-shaped citrine. And these have this wonderful affinity with the free-form cutting and setting of Mark Newell's untreated sapphires in interlocking rings from 2019. Gillian Packard also exemplifies the significance of the modern jewellery collection in diversifying and broadening the company. She was the first woman made a freeman for her work in the trade. Rosemary Ransom-Wallace took over as curator and art director from 1981. Her role in shaping the collection is clearly shown in the exhibition she curated to mark the new millennium in 2000, and in a series of special commissions made up to her retirement in 2018, including these wonderful pieces crafted in nephrite jade by Charlotte de Sillas. Since 1981, acquisitions and commissions have been overseen by the Contemporary Craft Committee. Our expert jewellery advisors have included David Thomas, John Donald, Jacqueline Mina, Charlotte DeSillis, Kevin Coates, Daphne Krinos, and currently Andrew Lamb, all of whom have pieces in the collection. We're fortunate also to have the jewellery experts Joanna Hardy, Amanda Game, and Corinne Julias currently on the committee, and we're very grateful to all of them. Pieces selected or commissioned for the collection should include an important element of precious metal and show above all the creative individuality of the studio artist jeweller. The collection has its own special character. It doesn't focus on the branded names of Cartier or Tiffany. Jewels retain their value for their craftsmanship and creativity and not for their precious metal content or set stones alone. In terms of making, artistic invention must be backed up by technical mastery. The great advocate of contemporary studio jewellery, Helen Dryght English, explains what this means in her preface to one of our books, the recent one on brooches, and here you see her wearing her own jewels. She says, "I seek ideas and concepts I've never seen before, but I also want to be certain that whoever made the piece has understood technically how to make it." In addition to purchases, many of them from the annual Goldsmiths Fair, commissions help to nurture the talent and build the experience and confidence of emerging jewellers, as well as celebrating the skills of more established makers and documenting their careers. The way in which the company continues to promote innovation and nurture talent is demonstrated by the 2019 Amaru brooch from Emmeline Hastings. This commission allowed her to develop her signature technique of embedding precious metal scales into acrylic, into something more kinetic and dramatic. It has a timeless quality, alluding to the ancient world, but at home in an imagined future. Jewels in our collection are worn and must have functional clasps and fittings. They can serve as ambassadors for the company's role in national life. The Platinum Jubilee brooch, which we commissioned from David Marshall London, was worn by the late Queen to light the Jubilee beacons in 2022, while the silver gilt buckles we commissioned from Clive Burr for the King's coronation slippers were worn for the ceremony in Westminster Abbey. Both commissions were seen by millions, and we kept duplicates in our collection. Sharing what we do with wider audiences is a way of introducing people to this world-leading British craft of art, jewellery, and silver. Gifts play a very important part in extending the range and reach of the collection, complementing our research projects, stimulating new questions, building collaborations and awareness. Gifts of work by non-UK makers are particularly important, as these are not things we would generally purchase from our purchasing budget. I'm going to show you how this works with a selection of gifts made to us since 2018, not just jewels, but design drawings. And this is just a selection of them. So the story starts in 2018 with the bequest by Eileen Bumfrey of a ring by John Donald from 1990, using his signature technique developed in the 1960s of textured cubes cut from square sectioned wire and soldered together. The technique seemed to absolute perfection on his iconic 1963 brooch in the company collection. That sent me back to early work by Donald in the collection, and that led to the idea of an exhibition, first online in 2020 and then at Goldsmiths Hall in 2021, Goldsmiths Centre, of brooches as experiments in form. 2019 was the year of Baroness Hale and the spider brooch that she wore when pronouncing the Supreme Court judgment on Boris Johnson's government during Brexit. And other women have led the way as wearers. The US former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, seen on the left, gave her 300 brooches and pins a whole new political language. And the late Queen's choice of brooches was understated but telling. Here she's wearing the Ruby Venus, made by Andrew Grimmer in 1966 from carved rubies, given to her by her husband. It was a piece of special significance and hardly ever seems to date. All of this stimulated public interest in the brooch as a form. The theme, the brooch unpinned, presented an interesting way of slicing the collection from 1961 to the present. In Manuela's wonderful design, Manuela Holfert's design for the Goldsmiths Centre, we focus on brooches as experiments in form and on their microengineering. The work was done in lockdown on visits into the collection to check on its conservation and security. There was limited access to libraries, and that meant talking to makers, their estates, curators and collectors from the USA to Finland, Sweden and Italy, gathering precious information about pieces in our collection, particularly work displayed in 1961. It was exciting to do, it was seen by thousands and generated a marvellous series of gifts. And the first gift was from Lucy Morton, silver expert and a member of our collections committee. She gave us this exceptional brooch from 1995 by silversmith Rod Kelly, famous for his chasing. It's his only jewel to date, which makes him an unusual choice perhaps, but Lucy explained that she and her father had chosen him because of the naturalism of his chasing. They asked him to make a ruby wedding brooch for Lucy's mother. It had to be robust enough to wear with tweeds and Wellingtons on walks through Toys Hill, inspired by trees of the National Trust woodland there. Rod produced an inspired design of birch, holly, oak and beech leaves, chased in silver within this curved frame. When we published the gift in our annual acquisitions report, Rod gave us the design drawings for the piece, along with designs for all his company commissions. The drawings deepen understanding of this brooch as a fine resource for teaching the next generation of makers. The drawings show alternate designs and costings, how the ruby is to be lit from beneath, how touches of gilding will work in the design, as well as the correct orientation of the jewel. As a rare jewel by a silversmith, it accompanies jewels by Gerald Benny in our collection, such as the 1961 claw pendant, which was shown in the International Exhibition. In 2023, Carol Devlin, the widow of the goldsmith and designer Stuart Devlin, gave us a group of his people jewels, cast in 18-karat gold between 1979 and 1986, his first jewels in the Goldsmiths Company collection, shown here in the latest acquisition report that we've just published, supporting contemporary makers. Gifts from makers are incredibly important in building an archive of the work of studio jewellers. The Belgian jeweller Leo de Vroomen was one of the makers supported straight after his arrival in the UK by Graham Hughes. He works in artistic partnership with his wife, Ginny de Vroomen, as designer. And they're famous for their exquisite work in enamel and the ancient art of repoussé. Seeing the work on brooches at the centre, they generously gave us the design drawings for their two brooches in the collection, a brooch hairpiece from 1990 and a signature spiral brooch commissioned in 2003. It was fun to place the finished jewels on the drawings to show the beauty of Ginny's designs for bass tie enamelling, which is laid over the flinking or carving of the ground to provide this subtle living texture of the jewels. They followed this gift with a donation in 2022 of one of their iconic pieces, the Aram Bangle of 1982, in 18-karat repoussé yellow gold set with cabochon sapphires. It's a very wearable sculpture, harmoniously linking colour and form, the highlight of their 2017 retrospective exhibition at Goldsmiths Hall. With it came a photo montage showing each stage in the making of the piece in repoussé with applied gold wire and some exquisite designs and working drawings showing exactly how the piece was designed to work as a jewel. A piece that arrived in time to go into the brooches book was Kevin Coates' generous gift of his 2012 Touch of Midas brooch, a complex narrative which tells the story of Midas, the legendary king of Phrygia, who was obsessed by his love of gold. He asked the gods for the power to turn anything he touched into gold. As he starved and thirsted, he begged to be released. Coates presents a Victorian version of the story, as Midas's beloved daughter Marigold, desperate to comfort him, throws her arms around his neck only to be turned into gold. The dreamlike feeling is conveyed in the way in which her sculpted head is set against an iridescent fragment of ancient Anatolian glass, suggesting a night sky, taking us back to the origins of the story. The ebony border is set with two opals. This is a story about touch. The crescent of piqué gold dots that frame the girl's head spell the brooch's title, The Touch of Midas, in the tactile language of Braille. The remarkable piece in pod necklace given to us by Jacqueline Steger in 2028 is another piece which has a special place in the company as making links across different areas of our collection, in this case between medals and jewels. The graduated aventurine beads are revealed and hidden within the bib of swelling, busting pods. Graham Hughes first encouraged Jacqueline Steger to make medals with her Medals Today exhibition in 1973. This necklace from the late 1970s uses the same cast motif in gold as on her Grow Food medal in bronze from 1974. Both pieces share that same humanitarian drive and show her free inventiveness in casting and her special ability to move between jewellery, sculpture, and medals. The gift arose out of renewed contact with the artist through our 2023 exhibition and book, celebrating 50 years of supporting art medals, The Art of Fame. In addition to makers giving their own work, we have remarkable patrons in the art world. I've met Helen Drutt English at the Wendy Ramshaw Memorial event in 2018 at Goldsmiths Hall. Through my friend Henry Nolte, I began long transatlantic conversations with her about brooches as wearable sculptures. And that led to a remarkable set of gifts, first of jewels by leading American designer makers, Marjorie Schick, Helen Shirk, and Eleanor Moti, to add to our extensive and important early American holdings from Arthur King and Stanley Lexin. But here I'd like to focus on the astonishing pieces by Brianna Casey, which she's given in memory of the artist, a dear friend whom she also represented in the US. Brianna Casey was a jeweller, weaver, sculptor, painter, and printmaker who first studied metalwork at Dartington School with Naum Slutsky. He started as assistant to Barbara Hepworth. All his work has this deceptive simplicity, a rough-hewn quality which the Irish sculptor Brian Fallon calls sophisticated primitivism. His jewellery draws on a repertory of geometric forms, leaves, birds, abstracted human figures, which is close to pre-Columbian or Neolithic art. And his art is immediately recognisable in any medium. The sculptural qualities of his jewellery led directly to sculpture. He explained how little silver animals on brooches evolved into silver animals in their own right. The silver figures started as jewellery mounts and display stands, and then became maquettes for larger sculptures, sometimes with added necklaces. This is an incredibly rare and significant group for the artist, which extends and complements the very important group of jewels which we had in the collection already, which had been acquired by Graham Hughes in 1972, when Brianna Casey's work was exhibited at Goldsmiths Hall. It joins work designed by other leading sculptors in the collection, with which I began. Helen's gifts inspired the donation of a pair of exquisite gold earrings from the early 1980s from the distinguished art critic Marina Vasey. These were given through the advocacy of Amanda Game, who knew the artist at the Oxford Gallery. Earrings have often been worn in the hall by our Prime Warden, Dame Lynn Brindley. Helen then gave us a group of miniature gold birds made in 1997 to 98, modelled in wax over wire armatures and then cast, a technique that Brianna Casey learnt from Connor Fallon. With their beautiful hand-carved jewelled eyes and the stylized forms with hatching, they represent O'Casey's wonderful concept of sculpture, and again, they're incredibly rare, pieces that led directly to his large-scale birds in cast bronze. In 2022, Frances and I curated an exhibition on rings, a world of invention, designed by Manuela Holfert. The book explored the collection from another angle, and then led to another group of amazing gifts, this time from Robert A. Hiller, like Helen Drutt, internationally known for his support for makers and museums in the US and in Europe. To mark our work on rings and on brooches, he gave us remarkable contemporary examples of each. First was Miriam Hiller's Myninia brooch from 2010. Her sawn art jewels are very widely collected, and she's famous mostly for hand-piercing steel. But Robert sought out a piece in silver, especially for us, which he gave in memory of Marjorie Schick. The brooch was accompanied by the paper model, what Hiller calls paper remains, and she loves them and generally keeps them on the walls of her studio. The drawing was placed over silver sheet, which was then hand-pierced through 2 layers, leaving silver filings stuck to the back. It reveals her way of working as she bends and folds the form, and is really remarkable as a gift. Robert Hiller also gave us a superb ring by the artist jeweller Anna Maria Zanella just a few months before her tragic early death in 2022. She was renowned for her accomplishment as a goldsmith, for her sense of colour and form, for her ability to transform inexpensive materials into art. She was a goldsmith in the Italian Renaissance tradition, mixing gold and silver with contemporary materials such as glass, plastic, acrylic, alongside iron, steel, and aluminium. She was a master of niello, of every kind of texturing and finish, but colour was her chosen medium. She had a very strong response to colour, part of growing up in Padua in Italy, where Giotto's frescoes in the Arena Chapel are set against skies of ultramarine pigment made from powdered lapis lazuli. She used ultramarine in her jewels as one of her favourite tones of blue, and she worked in a whole spectrum of reds. Her sense of colour was part of that response to the world that made each of her pieces a story. Zanella graduated from the famous Istituto Statale d'Arte Pietro Salvatico in Padua, and she later taught goldsmithing there from 1987 to 2000. But her work is rare in British collections. And so we were thrilled to receive the gift of this wonderful ring, Riflessi Rossi, Red Reflections, from Robert A. Hiller, in honor of the art publisher Dirk Allgaier. It's made from a single length of 18-karat gold wire, which has been manipulated into geometric forms with 2 squared-off shapes to hold the finger. The wire is threaded longitudinally through 3 beads of bright red Murano glass to make a dramatically different ring. Hiller acquired it directly from the maker through a selling exhibition organized by Dirk Allgaier, in whose honor he gave the piece. Zanella wrote that the ring is designed according to the harmony of geometry, the divine proportion of mathematics and the golden section, a ring that looks chaotic, but inside it has the golden proportion rule. She was delighted that her work should join our collection and enjoyed our books, saying, "All the rings and brooches are beautiful, like dreams." We kept in contact with Dirk Allgaier and with Renzo Pasquale, Anna Maria's husband, since Anna Maria's death, and that has led to a further gift from Renzo Pasquale from Anna Maria's own collection at home. It was part of a scheme to give pieces to a network of museums in Europe and America, in which the company was to be the only non-museum collection. I explained the requirement for a piece with an important element in precious metal, and this is the brooch that they selected for us as a complement to the ring. Zurich Rouge, which you see on the left, is a typical combination of textured gold, iron, and a flash of red pigment. It dates from 2001. Her husband Renzo told me the story. She was staying on the top floor of a hotel in Zurich and admired the beauty of the dawn and of sunset light seen on the tiled roofs below, and that inspired the palette and the combination of materials in layers. She textured the gold with a toothpick. This was made completely with her own hands, and that's special because later on, serious illness meant she could only sketch out her jewels, which Renzo would often finish for her. There is to be an exhibition in Padua of photos in black and white of people wearing Anna Maria's jewellery, with the jewels themselves shown in colour, along with 30 pieces of her actual jewellery. It will be a fascinating tribute to her, with a catalogue and work on her considerable archive of sketches and models, which Renzo plans to do. We're very keen to encourage him in that because it's an opportunity to build a maker's archive and document their career so fully. In our team at the company, we work hard to build up similar archives with every piece we acquire, including accurate copyright information, drawings, maker statements, models, and videos as an integral part of our commissioning process. Notes on file detail the approach to materials and any new technologies used. Emails and letters record source material and inspiration within the biography of a maker. These invaluable resources record the design concept and the making of an object as a key element in our understanding of them. They enrich the ways in which we can interpret the pieces in the collection, now and in the future. We hope to inspire makers to consider giving us more of this material, which relates to pieces in the collection, so that we can use them for teaching, publication, and further research in the years to come. Our ambitious plans to digitize our collections will eventually make much of it freely available online through our website to show who we are and what we do. And that will be a vital element in our support for our makers as we move towards our 700th anniversary in 2027. I'm now going to hand over to Frances to tell you about the wonderful work she's been doing on Dorothy Hogg and the Tree Project. Thank you. Can anybody hear? Perfect. Great. Well, I'm going to spend the next half an hour talking to you about a particular project we've been working on now for the past 3 years. So Dora's given you a wonderful introduction and overview as to how the jewellery collection started and the kinds of things that we have in it. But for us, a project is always really, really exciting because it gives us a different way of looking at what we have in the collection. And this project has also been extraordinary in that it's given us the most wonderful excuse to acquire several new things as well. So, Dorothy Hogg, an outstanding Scottish jeweller and craftswoman,
who very sadly died 2 years ago now in 2022. As well as being an outstanding jeweller in her own right, she also had a formidable reputation as a teacher and left a really outstanding legacy. She taught at Edinburgh College of Art for almost 25 years, and under her guidance, the silversmithing and jewellery course established an international reputation for excellence. So, as I said, we're going to go on to look at the pieces of hers we have in our collection and how we've used this project to look at other pieces that we have in her collection and how we can relate them back to her. But the first thing to say, which I think is symbolised beautifully by this picture on screen, is that this has been a collaborative project. Here you can see 4 different hands, 4 people involved in this project, all of them wearing one of Dorothy Hogg's cube rings, and everybody wearing it in a different way. It just goes to show quite how many hands have been involved in this project, the extent of the goodwill that we've drawn on, and I think it shows beautifully how the company functions when it functions at its best. It's been a wonderful opportunity for us to build on and work on our collection. We've loved every minute of it, but we've had a huge amount of help, and lots of the people who've been involved in this project are either watching online or in the room with us today. So huge thanks to everybody who's been involved. So, we now have one of the best collections of Dorothy Hogg's work in existence, which is hugely exciting. As we said, Dorothy did have the most fantastic legacy. And before she died, she started a project, the Tree Project, with Amanda Game. And the idea was that she wanted to explore the way in which a silversmithing and jewellery making education, a degree in design, could take you in any direction that you wanted to go. She was very, very interested in the way that learning things like hand skills, problem solving, thinking things through with your hands, finding an answer or a solution by drawing, could be life skills that could take you in many, many different directions. And these were the things that she wanted to inculcate in her students at Edinburgh. So the idea was that she chose a group of her alumni who had taken the education they'd received at Edinburgh in many different directions, and they wanted to explore the way in which this education had facilitated their later careers. It was named the Tree Project. It started out with the Scottish Goldsmiths Trust, and the most long-lasting aspect of it is a fantastic group of podcasts, series of podcasts, which you can listen to online. They're now under the care of the Glasgow School of Art, so anybody who's interested, please do go and listen to them. So that was one side of it, but the company's side of this project was an exhibition and the corresponding catalogue, and that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. So the exhibition is still up, it's in its final weeks. There are 2 cases. One of them shows all of our pieces of Dorothy's work, and as I said, this exhibition also gave us a different way of looking at our collection. So as well as pieces by Dorothy herself, we were able to exhibit pieces by people who had taught her and people that she worked with. So when Dorothy joined Edinburgh College of Art, she had 2 other people on her team, William Kirk, who had actually taught her while she was studying herself at Glasgow, and Susan Cross, the contemporary jeweller, and together they were known as the Holy Trinity. And here we can see Dorothy's works together with Susan's and Bill Kirk's. In the second case, we looked at Dorothy's educational legacy. So by using Dorothy as a starting point, we can look across a whole range of objects in our collection which are associated with Dorothy. So either people that she taught directly, or a lot of her alumni have now gone on to be teachers themselves. So across these 2 cases, we can show work by 4 generations of makers. People who taught Dorothy, Dorothy herself, people she taught, and people who were taught by people that Dorothy taught. So she has had the most outstanding impact across contemporary jewellery. So if we start right at the beginning, Dorothy Hogg came from a family of clock and watchmakers. Both her father and her grandfather were clock and watchmakers. She was born in Troon, and this is her grandfather James Hogg's shop in Troon. She worked there as a very young girl. She would spend her weekends there. She said it was just like entering a magical world. She was obviously just enthralled with the feeling, the sounds, the tools, the workshop from a very, very young age. And again, I think as we go through her work, you will see the ways in which these ideas about sound and movement, which come from this background in clock and watchmaking, have inspired her work, and also the idea of precision, which is very, very much to the forefront of all of her pieces. So her first degree was at Glasgow, and she is often described, or she described herself, as a silversmithing jeweller. I think one of the main reasons for that is that at Glasgow she was taught by two very, very significant silversmiths. The first was John Leslie Old, who she described herself as an extraordinary teacher. And in the company, we do have two pieces by him. This is lovely. This is a fishing trophy designed by him. You can see engraved with these beautiful seahorses. And here, I think this is really moving. This is his lovely signature carved into the bottom of this cup. And he, as well as Kirk, who we're going to come to in a minute, gave Dorothy some of her tools. And that was important to her all throughout her life. She mentioned that, I love the feeling of remembering the people when you're using the tools. And that's very, very significant. The feel of the tools in her hand and the history that they were bringing with them, the people that they related to, obviously meant a lot to her. And here we have a really extraordinary, very rare piece. This is a piece made by Dorothy herself while she was studying at Glasgow. It's a tea strainer with the design on the left, and this was lent to us for the exhibition, courtesy of the Pearson Silver Collection. And I think this is extraordinary. If you think this is somebody in the very first years of their silversmithing degree, look at the precision, look at the confidence, look at the beauty. It's so refined, and yet it's so restrained. There's nothing extra, but everything that is there is serving its purpose. It's absolutely beautiful. And I think the modernist look to it and the cleanness of the design is really apparent through all of her jewellery. So I think for somebody so young, it just shows quite what an outstanding craftsperson she was. And we were very, very grateful for this loan. So the other person who taught her at Glasgow was William Kirk, who was very well known for his hand raising, but also his engraving. And he taught at Glasgow, and then he moved on to work alongside Dorothy at Edinburgh College of Art. And I'm being a bit cheeky here in showing you the bottom of this cup first, because I just want to hold back the moment until I show you the cup properly, because it's beautiful. So we're looking at the hallmarks on the bottom. It's small, it would fit in the palm of your hand. It is, again, so modest, but just perfection. There's just, again, nothing too much, nothing too little. The hammered surface is absolutely beautiful. William Kirk was obviously a master at hand raising, and apparently his wife could tell the mood he was in from the sound of his hammering coming from the workshop, whether it was a good day or not. And I think the beautiful surface here is just remarkable. So here we go. It's lovely. It's just beautiful. I mean, that's worth coming to the exhibition alone. It's outstanding. Dorothy herself said he was an exceptional craftsman. I used to say to him, Bill, you know what it's like to be a piece of silver? And he would say to me, yes. That's all there, isn't it? He understood how to make the most of this material. But I think what's really interesting and important to point out is that if this previous one is a perfect piece of hand raising, this piece, which is also by William Kirk, is going in a totally different direction. It's abstract, it's sculptural, it's very ambitious, it's very, very different. It's not functional in the same way at all. And I think it goes to show the two very, very different aspects which Dorothy was teaching her students. I think something that holds all of her alumni together is that they are all producing confident, sculptural, ambitious jewellery. They are going in their own direction. They are making things that no one else is making, but they are making those things on a bedrock of very, very solid craft skills. And so these two pieces by William Kirk, the hand-raised cup and this sculptural piece, I think show those two angles coming together. They were in Dorothy, and then they were coming out of her and into her students. This, I'm afraid, is a slightly terrible picture, but I couldn't resist putting it in. This is a piece that we have newly acquired. We haven't yet had a chance to take a professional photo. It's by William Kirk, and it's obviously part of the same series that we saw before. So whereas the last one was a loan, which we are very grateful for, this piece we are very, very glad and excited will now be joining the collection, which is great. Bought at auction just a couple of months ago. So again, really, really nice the way this exhibition has given us the chance to acquire new pieces. So these, sadly, are not in our collection. This is just to represent the fact that after Glasgow, Dorothy moved to the Royal College of Art. And you can see these are very sharp, angular pieces. And she said herself that she thought it was moving away from the small Scottish town of Troon and moving down to London. It was an incredibly difficult and a very difficult course. I think it was very competitive, and she said that this was kind of what brought out the elbows and the angles, which did become such a hallmark of her work. So again, excuse the bad pictures, those are just scans. So at this point, we need to skip forward, and we come to 1997. So Dorothy, at this point, has studied at Glasgow, she's studied at the Royal College, and she's moved back to Scotland. She's done some teaching, she's established her own workshop, she has also had her first major exhibition at the Scottish Gallery, and she is now well into her period at Edinburgh, establishing this fantastic course. And at this point, the company takes notice of her and commissions the first piece in the collection. So this is her bangle with 100 rings, which is wonderful. You put it on your arm, and the rings move up and down and make a lovely soft sound like rain falling. If you look at it, can you see the way that surface of the inside of the bangle is just like the William Kirk cup? So it reflects back in so many ways. But it also, nobody else could have made that. It's so redolent of her work. The sound, the movement, the precision, the minimalism, the beauty. Wonderful. So when Dora and I arrived at the company, this is the one piece that we had of Dorothy Hogg's in the collection. 3 years later, we now have one of the most fantastic collections of her work. So how did that come about? In 2021, we were very lucky that we were able to acquire this piece from the Scottish Gallery. This is the gold-tipped brooch, and she said herself, Dorothy, I think these pieces, this series of round brooches, I think these pieces were, around 2000, and really I was thinking about the passage of time. So again, there's a long history of Scottish annular brooches that she's drawing on, but it also looks completely new, completely contemporary, and it's very her. You'll notice her colours are always a little bit of gold and the oxidised silver, which again, she says she thinks comes from the landscape in Troon, the light catching the Scottish seaside landscape. Beautiful. She was also the master at giving volume without weight, and these lovely hollow forms here show that really effectively. So we bought that from the Scottish Gallery, and we were amazed when, alongside of this piece, when we received it, we received this, which is a stock book, hand-drawn by Dorothy herself, which goes over all of what she saw as the major pieces in her career. So we've got work right from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, including, you can see, a lovely sketch there of the silver bangle. So this is so valuable for us. It shows us her own view of her own work. This is extraordinary, and we are very, very lucky to have it. So that is now in our archive collection. At the same time, we were able to acquire direct from Dorothy, through the generous advocacy of Corinne Julius, 3 more pieces, all of which have the most outstanding provenance. The first is the spirit level brooch here. And when I wrote to Dorothy and told her how much I admired this piece, she sent me one in the post. And that tells you everything you need to know about what a remarkably generous woman she was. This is a most fantastic metaphor. At the time that she made this series in the 90s, she was full-time working at Edinburgh. She was looking after her young son. She was looking after her elderly mother. And again, it's all about movement. So when the brooch is straight, the pendant pieces hang straight. But the minute you move, they entangle themselves. The minute you straighten up again, they perfectly align themselves. And that's because they are very carefully, the pendant pieces are all textured on one side but not the other. And if you look at them, they very carefully hang to one side. So again, it's this precision, this wonderful craftsmanship, which is underlying this much more kind of metaphorical aspect of the jewellery. But again, there's a very interesting metaphor in there, I think, about living with chaos, which I think to have managed to have her own career alongside that career at Edinburgh, she must have been very, very good at being able to do that. We were able to acquire this piece. She was given an MBE for her services to silversmithing and jewellery in 2001, and this is the piece that she designed herself to wear herself on that occasion. And the little pendant pieces at the bottom are a little like bells, and her husband and son spoke about the way that they could hear that sound as she walked across the stage to receive her MBE from the Queen, which is incredibly moving. And again, she's very well known for her Artery series brooch. This shows again how fond she was of both drawing down her own wire and making her own tube. This is a very well-known series, but she gave us, we were able to acquire this one, which she was very, very pleased with because she felt this one had a particular kind of sinuous nature to it, which she wasn't always able to achieve in her work. So again, fantastic provenance, and we're very, very thrilled to have that one. Finally, this again says everything about her generosity. We commissioned one of her cube rings. She'd been making these square cube rings since the 60s. She pointed out that actually nobody's finger is square. She said, I enjoy the surprise when the wearer finds out that their finger actually fits the strange geometry of a square ring. We commissioned one in silver. She sent us 2, And the second, as you can see, has just this one leg of French green gold. So this is somebody who's been working on this design for 40 years and is still finding really exciting ways to develop it. And that was the first time she'd ever worked with 2 different metals in one of these rings. So again, we're very glad to have that. And that was the ring that we featured at the beginning. At the time, as we made these acquisitions, Dorothy herself was hugely generous and donated to our archive 5 of her working notebooks. She had chosen them very, very carefully, as you can see, so that the particular pieces, they related to particular pieces in our collection, which is really, really exciting for us. So they've got variations on designs, they've got pieces of wire taped in, they've got kind of mood boards and inspiration. So we are incredibly lucky, again, to be able to have a view into her own kind of working state of mind and her own views of her own pieces. So again, we are thrilled to have those. We need to fast forward again till her final retrospective, very shortly before she died, at the Scottish Gallery in 2022. And at this point, we were lucky enough again to acquire, through Dorothy, another series of pieces. So this again is a very early ring that she made in the 1960s, probably while she was studying in London. Here is a very, very moving steel necklace. She made it at a time when the price of gold was so prohibitive and silver that she just didn't feel comfortable working in it, so she worked in steel. But interestingly, when she made this piece, she was pregnant with her young son. So again, those kind of swelling curves are very introspective and retrospective of her own life in that way. The pod necklace, which again, we were lucky enough to acquire this drawing, which shows the 8 different ways that it can be worn. And we were very lucky, again, that when we acquired those pieces, the Scottish Gallery gave us another gift. This is the square circle brooch. You can see that the square hangs at the top and pins onto you, and the circle swings like a pendulum, which again takes us back to the clock and watchmaking references. So, having given you a real rush through all of those pieces, it brings us to the last 2 pieces in our collection and the most recent gift. At the time of Goldsmiths Fair last year, we had the Hogg exhibition up, and we were very, very excited. Colin Fraser, a silver specialist who lives in Edinburgh, a great friend of Dorothy's, gave us this remarkable set of designs which Dorothy had given him. And these are nothing less than the designs that she produced for her diploma exam at Glasgow. So these are not necessarily pieces that she made, but designs she made under exam conditions. So the first is for a portable communion set. And look how striking that figure is, the Christ figure. I mean, it's really, really exciting to see the kinds of things that she was thinking about. A design for a chain of office. A coffee service. And a necklace, earrings, and a ring. So that was an incredibly generous gift, which has now joined our library and archive, and we are absolutely thrilled to have. Alongside the stockbook and the sketchbooks, this means we can now look into the whole, her range of working life right from its very earliest days. Alongside this, however, he also gave us these 2 rings. When William Kirk died, it was Dorothy who sorted out his studio. She found these 2 enamel test pieces, didn't know what to do with them, but didn't want to throw them away. She kept them. And then when she was in the final months of her life herself, she still wanted to be working. She found these test pieces and she set them herself into these 2 rings, which are now part of the collection. So these are some of the very last pieces that she made. So we now have rings right from the very earliest days of her career, right to the very last days of her life, which is incredibly moving. But also I think these pieces just encapsulate what a generous, collaborative woman she was, in that it was the people that she worked with that fed so clearly into her jewellery, the feeling of the tools, the background with her father and her grandfather in the workshop, the people she worked with and alongside. She was somebody whose own life, and then kind of also with the people that she worked with, just fed so clearly into her jewellery. So for us, these are really exquisite gifts, and that we can encompass all of that narrative and that story in these 2 really stunning objects. So, in my last 5 minutes, I'm just going to quickly run through the other things that we have in the collection which relate to Dorothy. So she taught alongside Susan Cross, as we said. She was the other member, the second member of the Holy Trinity. And Susan Cross's words about what they were trying to achieve at Edinburgh are, I think, really interesting. Dorothy and I worked together to develop, promote, and sustain the ethos of the studio. Our teaching encouraged breadth and sensitivity of material handling, the honing of practical making skills, a focus on detail, the development of a critical awareness, and the setting of high standards in all aspects of the process. We encouraged a strong work ethic and an ambitious attitude. We intended that students who studied according to these principles would graduate imbued with a strong sense of self-belief, confidence, and professional aptitude. And I think you'll agree with me when you see the alumni that came out of this course that we're going to go through next. They more than achieved that. So this is a beautiful sequin necklace commissioned by the company in 1996. Here are two of her brooches where she has crocheted precious metal wire. And this, again, is really exciting. I haven't got time to run through the whole story, which is a real shame because it's absolutely outstanding. But we were thrilled to be able to acquire this Crimson Trace 1 brooch as part of our collection, which feeds beautifully into Susan Cross's interest in translating techniques to do with textiles into precious metal. So again, a really outstanding piece and a very, very exciting acquisition for us, purchased direct from Susan in 2023. Anna Gordon, who was taught by Dorothy and now is head of silversmithing and jewellery at Glasgow. So she is really taking on Dorothy's legacy, and under her guidance, Glasgow is a really outstanding centre of learning, and a lot of our latest acquisitions have come from Glasgow students, so that we can trace that legacy very, very clearly now through Dorothy, through Anna, and down to her students. Here are two of her brooches from 2003. Beautiful gold one on the left with the moving elements, the little leaf shapes move around on the kind of trellis shape behind. The oxidized silver and gold one, the linear square on the right, 2018, much more recent. And again, very, very exciting. We have just been able to acquire this piece, which is huge. It's the biggest brooch of Anna's I've ever seen. It's about this size and very, very hot off the press. She's only just finished making it, just finished at the end of 2023 and exhibited in the GCDC exhibition in 2024. So a really exciting new acquisition for us. And when I asked Anna about Dorothy, she said, Dot has been a constant presence throughout my career, first as my teacher, then as a mentor and dear friend. I will remember her for her generosity, enthusiasm, and her passion for craft, as well as her talent for bringing out the very best in those she taught. Her love of drawing influenced not only her work, but how she developed the talents of emerging makers, encouraging a visual language and an interrogation of form and composition. This attention to detail has resulted in a fantastic legacy of makers who have all been touched by Dorothy's magic. Dorothy has hugely influenced the way I approach my current role and how I hope to get the very best out of my students. I also know I have a duty to pass this on to the next generation. She is still a constant presence. So she's obviously someone who is still very, very much in Anna's thoughts about how she teaches herself. Andrew Lamb, who needs no introduction, but and we have a fantastic collection of his work in the company. I'm not showing them all here, but I think it's very, very telling that even somebody who has been as successful as Andrew Lamb, recently someone asked me how I measured my own success. It is true to say that what is often in the forefront in my mind is, what would Dot think and would she be proud? It's lovely. Colin O'Doyle, who, while he was studying at Edinburgh, went through a masterclass with a silversmith from Tokyo, and ever since then is very, very interested in particularly Japanese metalworking techniques and has made his career entirely in that direction. So again, he can trace all of his later interests to an event, something that happened to him at Edinburgh, which is really remarkable. Kathy Pilkington, very, very well-known British sculptor who actually studied silversmithing and jewellery under Dorothy. She started out in the sculpture department. She hated it. She moved over to silversmithing, and apparently her silversmithing and metalworking skills were absolutely terrible. But Dorothy didn't mind. Dorothy recognised that she was going to get something in her department, an education in her department, which she was not going to get in the sculpture department. She described working with Kathy as like having an unexploded bomb in the department. But again, I think it's really, really interesting, and it just goes to show that it wasn't just those silversmithing and metalworking techniques that Dorothy was teaching. It was an attitude. It was a way of working and a way of thinking, and that actually has obviously paid off hugely in Kathy's case. Kathy described her as intensely alert with a clarity of purpose that I had never seen before. Dot was simply a phenomenon, and I feel so lucky to have been her student and friend throughout my life. Like so many of her lucky graduates, that's why I call her the mothership. And again, there's something very personal about that. There's obviously a very personal relationship that Dorothy had with her students. Hazel Thorne, when we acquired this in 2011, she was the youngest silversmith to be acquired for the company collection. Grace Girvan, this beautiful piece here inspired by St. Ninian's Isle, which is an isthmus that goes out into the water in Scotland. And so there is a kind of a strip of land with the water meeting it on both sides. So the piece in the middle is a bit like the land, and then the two colours on the sides is the water where it meets the land. Absolutely stunning, and we acquired that in the fair last year. She again is one of Dorothy's alumni. Joanne Thompson again needs no introduction, with two beautiful pieces of hers in the collection. Meeson one of Dorothy's first MA students, and again we were very, very lucky to acquire this beautiful piece here. And she is very, very influenced by these, well, actually, I think the one thing I would like to tell you about Meeson One is that when she was looking at which university to come to, it wasn't just that Edinburgh had this great reputation, it was also that she felt that Dorothy was really friendly. And when she was moving over from South Korea, the relationship that she was able to get with Dorothy was obviously just as important as the education that she was going to receive. Elizabeth Jane Campbell, here's the conflicted brooch. Sheng Zhang, who was taught at Edinburgh, became an artist in residence at Glasgow and is now part of the very successful Five Collective. And again, I think you can see something really about the Dorothy Hogg's minimalism here, very evident. Megan Brown, who interestingly started out studying at Edinburgh, but left after a couple of years because she thought actually she wanted to be in the trade rather than formal education. But she comes from a family of weavers, and here she is weaving precious metal chains around this central structure. Eleanor Whitworth, the veiled brooch, who she was a recent Glasgow graduate and also an artist in residence. And Marianne Anderson, who was also a Glasgow graduate, but also now teaches at Glasgow. So through these last pieces, you can see there is a really, really strong thread in the pieces we've been acquiring lately and how many of them are linked through Glasgow and then back to Dorothy. And again, excuse the terrible picture, this is a really recent acquisition we've just purchased from Collect 2024. This is Marianne Anderson again and her beautiful quatrefoil frame and chain garnet necklace. And my final two slides, I'm sorry that's been a bit of a rush, but there obviously has been a huge amount of material to get through. Katie Hackney, an Edinburgh graduate, I loved this quote and I just couldn't resist putting it in. I remember once seeing Dorothy in a supermarket. She had a star fruit in her hand, which she held first to her lapel and then to her ear. Even whilst grocery shopping, jewellery was on her mind. So again, I think it just shows beautifully that jewellery and design was what Dorothy did. It wasn't just her work, it was her whole persona. And I think everyone that she worked with and taught has really inherited that from her. So Katie Hackney is somebody, again, who is a great example, who's taken her design and silversmithing career and gone in all kinds of different directions. So she does a lot of other things as well in making jewellery, but these were two things that she was kind enough to lend us for the collection. The dog brooch on the left, she made while she was at Edinburgh. You can't really see, but on the face it says woof woof, and on the legs it says run run, and on the bottom it says poo poo. So it says a lot about the quality of the drawn line, you know, the interest in drawing, which was something that Dorothy was really keen to inculcate in her students. But I think it also says something about the sense of fun. They must have felt very confident and comfortable to make something a little bit silly like this as part of their degree. And I think that also is a very important aspect of the education they received. And we'll finish here with Natalie Ride, who again is a visual artist who does all kinds of other things. But this piece she drew for us especially for the collection. This is a screen print, 2023. It's called Square Peg and Round Hole. She was somebody who she felt wasn't a natural fit in the silversmithing course. But when she said this to Dorothy, Dorothy described her as a square peg in a round hole. So obviously that idea that everybody was valued no matter what skills they were bringing with them, and that difference, the square peg in the round hole, was actually where her strength lay. And I think, again, that idea of empowering her students is really, really significant. Natalie said, whatever she set out to do, it was with tenacity and to the best of her abilities. I think this is evident in the legacy of her jewellery work, which she described as embarrassingly autobiographical. You see the rigour and quality of the metalwork with a soft edge or a curve. Running through the formal design, there is fun and surprise. At the opening of the Goldsmiths exhibition, you could see people emotionally moved by seeing her work laid out in retrospect, because it is such a testament to its maker. It holds such vitality, one feels as if she is still here. So again, I think we should just finish by leaving the last words to Dorothy. And she said, with specific reference to the company's acquisitions of her work, "I used to say it's absolutely wonderful when a museum buys your piece, because you know it's never going to end up in the washing machine." Thank you.
Hello? Yes. That was the most amazing tribute to Dorothy Hogg's work. And although I don't own any of her pieces, in tribute to her, I'm wearing a Susan Cross brooch tonight in the form of a Catherine wheel. So that's the best I can do. And that was just the most extraordinary introduction to the establishing of the Goldsmiths Company collection, how it came to be, the remarkable pieces that are there and how it continues to grow and develop. It's just astonishing. So those were both such remarkable insights. Now, we're ready for some questions. We, I believe, have 2 roving microphones, as they're called. Where is the other one? Oh, thank you so much. See, I'm so distracted by these fantastic lectures. So who would like to raise a hand who might have a question for either of our speakers? Either Dora or Francis. Everybody's speech.
In that case, can I ask?
Yes.
That's the most wonderful talk, and I have a chance to say that shortly, so I won't say that now. But commissions were very important in the Goldsmiths Company at one stage. Is that still the case? Because you're collecting in so many other ways that are going so well.
It absolutely is the case that commissions are the lifeblood of the Goldsmiths Company collection. And I think one of the things that gives it a particular shape and such a set of interesting connections through people and things. It's true in jewellery, straightforwardly in jewellery. The last, well, apart from the royal commissions I showed you, the platinum jubilee brooch and the buckles, the most recent one that was done through the Contemporary Craft Committee was the Amory brooch by Emmeline Hastings, which arose from seeing her work at Goldsmiths Fair and thinking that we could mentor her to do something even more challenging. And that idea of growing through a commission is incredibly important to us in the company. If we can help set up mentoring or give people guidance or help that they might need, or help them come on in their own work to a place they want to go, that's really important. But we haven't done very many recent specific jewellery things. We're just moving into some now, and obviously as they're in process, I probably won't say any more about them at this point. But commissions remain incredibly important, whether they're Prime Warden's commissions, so there's this custom by which the elected head, I suppose the chairman of the governing board would be the way to describe what the Prime Warden is, gets at the end of their term a special amount of money for a special commission which is very personal to them. It could be a piece of jewellery, it could be a piece of silver. It's usually something that's used in the hall, and nearly all our jewellery is working jewels that are worn unless it's too fragile or has special conservation needs. The things are worn, the things are used, the silver is used, it goes out on the tables for lunches and so on, the cork cups which are designed individually for their patrons to tell the story of one person and their relationship to the person they've chosen to make it. There are these fantastic personal connections that run through the different commissions, so they remain incredibly important to us.
Thank you, Dora, for such a wonderful lecture. I wonder if I might pick up on the commission theme. How much, how do you approach an artist? Do you just say, oh, make us something beautiful? Or do you say, we want gold and we want silver and we want some diamonds? Or what's the sort of direction that you would give an artist when you're commissioning a piece?
It varies hugely. Obviously, if it's one of those royal commissions, there's a very short period of time to produce it, and there's a very tight brief and a very tight budget and a very tight timetable. So the thing is is fairly nailed down, but we might invite people to submit a certain set of design makers to submit designs for a competition. If there's time to do that, we always try and include that sort of element. Often it's a much more free-form thing where we'll invite somebody in who's been identified through the Contemporary Craft Committee and our various experts and networks that we use, or through the fairs that we go to, or through the Goldsmiths Centre, or all sorts of different colleagues who help to advise us and build those networks. Someone will come in and present to the committee and something might come from that, or we will see their work and think, oh, well, they could refine that or approach that slightly differently, and that would be an interesting way to help nurture them through a commission. It could be so many different sorts of things. The Prime Wardens Commissions, though, we try and encourage the most direct personal relationship between the patron and the maker, so that you get something that is truly original and new, and where the commissioner can feel that they are almost a co-creator with the person who's making it. And we try to encourage that sort of environment in which that would be so. Does that go some way towards answering your question?
That's fascinating.
Thank you. Dora, you never really touched on the premise or the original idea of the exhibition in 1961. Why was Graham Hughes organising it in the first place? And when Carol Hogben and with the V&A, could you elaborate on that, please?
I'm not the expert on that, but I believe the exhibition started in the V&A entirely, and it was based on mostly their collection, and it was going to be their exhibition. I think the problems came with probably the budget and the great ambitions that they had. And the Goldsmiths Company, while not being a bottomless pit of money, did have a hall and did have the ability to put it on. And I think it was probably that, more than any other factor, which encouraged them to collaborate.
Yes, no, I was really asking about more why was it organised in the first place? It was because British jewellery was moribund, as to use his own words, and they needed some inspiration.
The inspiration was to show the evolution of what they considered, the curators, to be modern jewellery, starting with Lalique in the 1890s with the V&A's most important collection, and then building with loans from 33 different countries, but not just the established jewellery houses, thinking also of people who were working above a garage in Helsinki, like Bjorn Wexström practically was. People who had only made one or two pieces, even though they'd been through exacting training. And the idea was to bring these pieces together and juxtapose them in exciting and new and different ways to really energize what could be done in jewellery, as far as I understand it. And people like Bjorn Wexström, who's still alive and well in his late 80s in Helsinki, still talk about the excitement of coming. He said to me, it was just amazing. First of all, you have lunch with Andrew Griemer and, somebody spills tomato soup down your one white decent shirt, and you get a copy of Graham Hughes's, most recent publication or whatever, and then he sweeps up your one ring and puts it next to something by Picasso or Braque or Jean Arp, and it just gave him an energy to go back and break all the rules, as he put it. And as you know, he made his space-age jewellery and Princess Leia's necklace and Star Wars, completely different from the aesthetic he'd followed up until then. And that energy, he says, came to him through taking part in that exhibition. So that was what Graham Hughes was trying to do.
I seem to remember Graham saying that it started off as a very small idea in his mind, and it sort of grew rather out of control, actually. But a treasured memory of mine with Dorothy Hogg, I got to know her when she was the goldsmith in residence in the V&A. And the ring that she wore, which was very similar, if not one that you showed, was a triangular blue stone with a square shank. And I said to her, isn't it uncomfortable? Instead of sort of telling me that it was comfortable, she just took it off her finger and said, try it on. And it was comfortable, extraordinarily so. And that is a treasured memory. I mean, the only thing I have to say about your talk, Dora, is that It's slightly sad because I thought I knew so many of those people and they're no longer with us, but that's my problem for getting too old.
Just a very small one for Francis. I mean, firstly, congratulations, both of you. What you've achieved in the short time you've been there is absolutely impressive, beyond belief. It's wonderful. But I wanted to ask you, you know, she gave so much, or you acquired so much of her work, this is Dorothy Hogg again, fortuitously or however. Did she give anything to Edinburgh where she was working? If was there indeed anything left over to give after everything she gave to you?
They do have a fantastic collection of her work, and she always worked very, very closely with other cultural institutions in Edinburgh, the Scottish Gallery, of course, but also the National Museums of Scotland, and they do have, again, an outstanding collection of her work. So yes, I think that relationship was reflected in the pieces that they have, yes. But I think it's really important to bring out her generosity because it was obviously such an important part of everything that she did. The work is so autobiographical. I think that's actually really generous to feel confident enough to share aspects of your life in your work like that. The way she treated other people, whether she was teaching them or working with them or being taught by with them. She had a real talent for establishing relationships, for making people feel like, you know, they were the one person that she wanted to work with. And I think that generosity is just evident in everything that she did. And it's been a real hallmark of the project. We've encountered such an extraordinary amount of of goodwill from not just Dorothy and her family, but everybody that she worked with and who worked alongside her. So again, it was obviously just a very, very strong characteristic which was in her work. And I think it shows in the work of everybody that she taught as well. So it's been a lovely project from that point of view.
Maybe I'll give you a... Thank you. I'm not quite sure who this answer is.
Thank you very much for two brilliant and very different talks. But both of you alluded to the ways in which the collection and the way that you're collecting now can be used as a sort of teaching tool for the next generation. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that and how you approach it.
Well, certainly I can talk first with specific reference to the Hogg collection. The most obvious way we've been doing that, apart from the exhibition in the book, is through events that we hold in the library. So we have inspiration sessions where working silversmiths, jewellers, young designers of all kinds can come and access that archival information in the library, and it then feeds back into their own work. So that's perhaps the most obvious way that these particular designs of hers, but that's why things like the gifts of the stockbook, the notebooks, but also those designs that Colin Fraser gave us, for us to have that insight into her design work throughout her career makes the most phenomenal teaching tool. And I also think it's very important for people at an early stage of their career to have the confidence, to see what people are achieving at different levels of their career. And I think to be able to see those early works really offers people who are training themselves something very, very different, because it's very difficult and probably quite intimidating to look at very, very accomplished designs from people right at the end of their career, or when they're, really in their stride in a kind of mid-career phase. So those early works of Dorothy are extraordinarily accomplished, but they're also very different to what she was doing on later. So I also think it's interesting that it gives people the freedom to explore before they might have found what is their kind of signature style. So we are incredibly grateful for those gifts because they have an extraordinary importance for us in how we can teach and what we can teach. And the notebooks are brilliant in Dorothy's annotations. It says things like, this worked, this didn't work, this took too long, this took 5 hours or 6 hours, or, remember it needs to be 0.2 wire, not 0.3. And to get that insight again into what life in her workshop and in her head was like is phenomenal. And again, I think for people who are living like that themselves, making like that themselves, to see inside her working life is incredibly helpful and encouraging and interesting and inspiring.
Thank you. We also do more general teaching with the foundation students and apprentices at the Goldsmiths Centre, which of course is the leading UK's educational charity for silversmithing and jewellery and for teaching young people business skills as well. And we have regular visits with them where they get access to the best things in our collection. I think that's really important with their tutors. focused on particular techniques. So we have them on enamels, or we look at hand raising, or we look at chasing. And the tutors work with us to select the pieces that they get to handle. They also have sessions on the antique collection, which is remarkable in the Goldsmiths Company. It's nothing like as good as the British Museums or the V&As, but it has some star and extraordinary pieces that we've commissioned since the 1740s, wonderful Victorian things, really interesting early hallmarked pieces that tell the story of hallmarking, which again is an important thing that young emerging silversmiths need to work with and to understand. So we do formal teaching sessions too, and then we also have handling sessions for particular groups of students from wherever they come from with their tutors, Royal College of Art, the City and Guilds medalists, or whatever it may be. It's quite difficult for us to do that because it's very labour intensive and we're not a museum team and we don't have a study room. Hence, Francis is quite right that we use the library as our sort of handling space. It's the nearest thing we have to a study room of the sort we'd really need to do as much as we'd like to. But it's an important element of what we try to do.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, I think I'm going to ask Richard to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much. I would only say on the 61 exhibition that perhaps the genius of Graham Hughes met the passion of the V&A for the 20th century, which the circulation department had, and those two things came together to great exhibition you've seen, which began small and ended up with 900 pieces and a system of logging in and logging out that perhaps no museum would have been happy with, but which worked on the day, didn't it? So well done everybody. And it's really not too soon, you know, some will say it is, those who are very old will say it is, but it isn't too soon to say that worthy successors of Graham Hughes are now to be found in the two speakers we've heard tonight, who with, as you can see, the enormous passion and enormous knowledge. I mean, it's God of Jewellery works in interesting ways, doesn't he? Because, or she, probably she, undoubtedly she, because she's taken a Merovingian king expert and a Renaissance object expert and turned them into contemporary jewellery people of enormous passion, interest, knowledge, and all those skills learned in those earlier boring periods are now brought to bear on the 20th century, the 21st century. So well done them. We've had the most wonderful talk. We knew we would. We can reflect on the fact that at the end of the 19th century, was it the clerk of the Goldsmiths Company? Nigel will tell me, who said that the Goldsmiths Company has as little to do with jewellery as it has to do with pots and pans. I first heard that from Nigel's lips. As tinkers' wares, there you are. I heard it from Nigel about 30 years ago, and I have seen it in writing since, so I'm sure it's true. But you probably heard it at the time, didn't you, Nigel? I don't know. Nobody's going to hear you, Nigel, you say anything. I'm sorry. I love you dearly. But dwell on the fact the late 19th century jewellery didn't count the Goldsmiths Company. 1961, it blew up. 700 pieces required in about the next 15 years, something like kind under Graham Hughes. And now you can see they're on to being one of the world's great resources for understanding contemporary jewellery. I mean, it's quite straightforward, that, isn't it? Books are coming out, exhibitions are being done. Of course, therefore, gifts are being attracted. This is what happens when things go well. And you have the resources to buy things as well. It's a dream team in a dream place doing a fantastic job. So, thank you very much for tonight. We knew it would be fantastic, and it has been.
Well, that was really superb. Just before we go next door to have a celebratory drink, I just want to say, first of all, a big thank you to Matthew, who's sitting back there, and who has, this may be the last time that he assists us with everything that he does, but it is thanks to him that people are watching us live right now, and afterwards he carefully edits the footage and sends it on to Natasha, who gets it onto our YouTube channel, which enables people who can't be watching us right now to catch up on such a fantastic talk. So I'd like you to really thank Matthew, because we came into the modern times thanks to him. Thank you, Matthew. And just to remind everybody that our next lecture will be held on the 28th of May, featuring Dr. Beatrice Shadow-Samson on the jewellery of Johann Carl and Carl Thomas Bossard of Lucerne, from historicism to Art Deco, 1868 to 1934. So we will look forward to seeing you either in the room or watching us live or on a recording in the future. Many thanks indeed. Enjoy the rest of the evening.